I'm Isabel Carter, at 54. I thought I knew my husband, 30 years of marriage, perfect life, until I surprised him at work with birthday cake and found him holding his male assistant's hand. My entire life was a lie, but the affair was just the beginning of a nightmare involving fraud, blackmail, and threats. Before I tell you everything, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. I woke that Friday morning to sunlight streaming through our bedroom curtains. The kind of golden light that makes you believe everything in your life is exactly as it should be. 54 years old, and I still got butterflies thinking about Edward's birthday. 30 years of marriage hadn't dulled that flutter, or so I thought. I slipped out of bed quiet, leaving him sleeping peacefully, his chest rising and falling in that familiar rhythm I'd memorized decades ago. In the kitchen, I tied my apron and started on his favorite chocolate cake, the recipe I'd perfected back when we were newlyweds in Charleston. The house smelled like cocoa and butter, like home, like love. Reunions all day, Edward had mumbled that morning before kissing my forehead and rushing out. Always so busy, my husband, always so dedicated. I spent the morning baking, icing, writing a card in my careful cursive to my Edward, who made every day of these 30 years worth living. Forever yours, Isabel. By noon, I was driving toward his office building in downtown Atlanta, that gleaming glass tower that always made me proud. Edward Carter, CEO, my husband, the man everyone admired. The roses sat in the passenger seat, ruby red and perfect, the cake balanced carefully in its box on the floor. I parked and walked through the lobby, heels clicking against marble, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. The surprise on his face would be worth everything. But the security guard stopped me at the elevator bank. I'm sorry, ma'am. Only authorized personnel. I'm Isabel Carter. I smiled warmly. The owner's wife. Something shifted in his expression. Discomfort, pity maybe. He glanced away, then back at me, weighing something I couldn't understand. Mrs. Carter, he lowered his voice. Maybe you shouldn't go up there. My smile faltered. Excuse me, your husband. He stopped, struggling. Look, I probably shouldn't say this, but everyone here knows he's not really into women, if you know what I mean. The words hit me like ice water. What are you talking about? He's got a thing with his assistant, Andrew. They're pretty open about it up there. My hands went numb. The roses suddenly felt impossibly heavy. You're mistaken, I whispered. But even as I said it, something cold and knowing settled in my stomach. The elevator chimed, the doors slid open, and there they were, Edward, my Edward, hand in hand, with a young man I'd met at company functions. Andrew, with his kind eyes and nervous smile, they were standing close, too close, talking in low voices, their fingers intertwined like it was the most natural thing in the world, until they saw me. Edward's face drained of color, his mouth opened but no sound came out. Andrew stepped back, releasing Edward's hand, his expression crumbling into horror. Isabel! Edward's voice cracked. The cake slipped from my hands. It hit the marble floor with a wet thud, chocolate icing exploding across the pristine white stone. The roses tumbled after it, petals scattering like drops of blood. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare at the man I'd loved for 3 decades, the man who'd promised me forever, the man who was looking at me now with guilt and fear and something else. Relief. Isabel, please. He stepped toward me. I ran, through the lobby, past the startled guard, into the parking lot where the sunlight suddenly felt too bright, too harsh, exposing everything I'd been too blind to see. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. Edward's voice echoed behind me, calling my name, but I didn't look back. I drove home through tears, the city blurring into watercolors around me. 30 years. 30 years of loving a lie. I didn't leave my bedroom for 3 days. The first night I sat on the edge of our bed, my bed now, I suppose, staring at the wall until darkness swallowed the room. I didn't turn on the lights. The shadows felt appropriate, honest in a way the sunlight wasn't. Edward's pillow still smelled like his cologne, cedar, and something citrus. I'd bought it for him last Christmas. How many lies fit into a bottle of cologne? My phone buzzed incessantly. 17 calls from Edward the first day, 23 the second. By the third day, he'd stopped calling and started leaving flowers at the door. White lilies, funeral flowers, I thought bitterly. appropriate for mourning the death of everything I'd believed in. Lucy came by on Sunday morning. My daughter has always been perceptive. Even as a child, she knew something was catastrophically wrong the moment she saw me. Mom. Her voice carried that particular tremor of adult children who suddenly realize their parents are human. You look terrible. Are you sick? Just a flu, I lied, pulling my robe tighter. Nothing serious. But Lucy's eyes, Edward's eyes, I realized with a jolt, didn't believe me. She stayed for an hour making tea. I didn't drink, straightening pillows I'd rumpled with sleepless nights. When she finally left, she hugged me longer than usual. I love you, Mom. Whatever it is, I cried. For an hour after she left, Daniel called that afternoon, checking in from his apartment across town. I performed normalcy for him. Yes, everything's fine, just tired. How's work? He bought it more easily than Lucy had. Or maybe he just didn't want to look too closely. My son had always been more comfortable with surfaces than depths. The photo albums came out on the third night. I don't know why I tortured myself, but I pulled them down from the closet shelf. These heavy books full of glossy lies. Our wedding day, Edward in his tuxedo, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Me in my mother's vintage dress, believing I was the luckiest woman in Charleston. Had he loved me then? Even a little. Family vacations to the Outer Banks. Lucy and Daniel building sandcastles while Edward and I held hands in the surf. His arm around my waist at countless company parties, birthday dinners, anniversary celebrations, Sunday mornings at church where we sat in the third pew like the perfect Christian couple we pretended to be. 30 years of photographs, 30 years of smiles that suddenly looked like grimaces, 30 years of a man performing heterosexuality while I played the fool beside him. I was drowning in memories when Martha showed up. Martha Lewis had been my best friend since college, back when we were both idealistic girls who thought we understood how the world worked. She'd become a lawyer, I'd become a wife. We'd stayed close through it all. Though lately our lunches had grown further apart as my world narrowed to Edward's orbit, she didn't knock. The door to my bedroom simply opened, and there she stood, power suit, perfectly styled hair, carrying 2 cups of coffee, and a look of fierce determination. Lucy called me, Martha said, sitting on the bed without asking permission. Said you've been in here for 3 days with a flu that requires no medicine and produces no symptoms beyond refusing to answer your phone. I couldn't look at her. Martha, I really can't. He's gay, isn't he? The words hung in the air like a grenade. My silence confirmed what she'd somehow already guessed. Martha didn't gasp or clutch her pearls or offer meaningless platitudes. She simply set down the coffee, pulled me into her arms, and let me sob into her expensive blazer until I'd soaked it through. I saw them together, I finally choked out between gasps. At his office, Edward and Andrew holding hands like it was the most natural thing in the world. Oh, honey, 30 years, Martha. 30 years of my life. Was any of it real? Did he ever actually love me? Or was I just convenient? Martha pulled back, gripping my shoulders hard enough to make me meet her eyes. Listen to me, Isabel. You need to talk to him, not to forgive him. God knows you don't owe him that. But to understand, because right now, you're drowning in questions, and questions without answers will eat you alive. I can't face him. Yes, you can, because you're Isabel fucking Carter, and you've never been weak a day in your life. I almost smiled at her profanity. Martha only cursed when she meant business. That night, I finally responded to Edward's messages. 3 words. Coffee. Tomorrow noon. His reply came in seconds. Thank you, I'm so sorry. Sorry. Such a small word for such a massive betrayal. I stayed awake until dawn, writing in my journal all the questions that needed answers, all the accusations that needed voicing, all the grief that needed witnessing. My handwriting grew increasingly unreadable as rage replaced the numbness I'd been wrapped in. By the time the sun rose, I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt furious, and fury, I was learning, was so much better than despair. The cafe was in Decatur, far enough from our usual haunts that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a table in the back corner, my back to the wall like I was preparing for war. Maybe I was. Edward walked in at exactly noon, and I barely recognized him. The man who prided himself on impeccable appearance Looked like he'd aged a decade in 3 days. His shirt was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair uncombed, dark circles carved into the flesh beneath his eyes. Good, I thought viciously. Let him suffer. He sat down across from me, hands trembling as he reached for mine. I pulled away so fast my coffee nearly spilled. Don't! Isabel! No! My voice came out harder than I'd intended. Drawing glances from nearby tables, I lowered it to a fierce whisper. You don't get to touch me. You lost that right when you spent 30 years lying to my face. He flinched, like I'd slapped him. I know, and I'm so... Don't you dare say you're sorry. Sorry is for accidentally breaking a vase, not for destroying someone's entire life. Edward's face crumbled. Actual tears began streaming down his cheeks, and part of me, the part that had loved this man for 3 decades, wanted to comfort him. The rest of me wanted to throw my coffee in his face. Talk, I commanded. Tell me everything and don't you dare lie to me again. He nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand like a child. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. I knew when I was 16. The confession hit me like a physical blow. 16, my voice cracked. You knew when you were 16 years old. I was at summer camp. There was this boy, Marcus, and I felt things I'd never felt before, things I'd been taught were wrong, sinful, impossible. He laughed bitterly. My father would have killed me, literally. You remember what he was like? I did. Edward's father had been a fire and brimstone Baptist minister, the kind who preached hellfire every Sunday and practiced casual cruelty every other day of the week. So you decided to live a lie instead. I decided to try to be normal. He looked up at me, and the anguish in his eyes was genuine. I prayed, Isabel. I prayed every single day for God to fix me, to make me the man I was supposed to be. When I met you in college, you were so beautiful, so kind. And I thought, his voice broke, I thought if I could just love you enough, marry you, build a life with you, I could make it true. You used me. The words tasted like ash. You used me as a beard, as your cover story, as proof to the world that you were normal. No, God, no, it wasn't like that. He reached across the table again. But I leaned back. I loved you. I love you. Maybe not the way a husband should love his wife, but Isabel, you were my best friend. You still are. The life we built was a lie, was real, he insisted desperately. Our kids are real. The home we made, the years we shared, that was real. My feelings for you are real, even if they're not. Romantic, I laughed, and it sounded unhinged even to my own ears. So what? I'm supposed to feel grateful. Thanks for the 30 years, honey. Glad I could serve as your heterosexual alibi. That's not fair. Fair? My voice rose again. You want to talk about fair? What about the years I gave you, the opportunities I turned down because being your wife was supposed to be enough? I could have gone to law school, could have had a career, but I chose to be the perfect corporate wife instead. And for what? So you could live your truth while I lived your lie? Edward was openly sobbing now. A waitress approached, saw the scene, and quickly retreated. When? I demanded. When did you meet him? Andrew, 3 years ago. He applied for the assistant position and he was so qualified, so bright. I don't care about his resume. When did it start? Edward's silence told me everything. 3 years, I breathed. You've been cheating on me for 3 years. It wasn't supposed to happen. I fought it, I swear I did. But Isabel, for the first time in my entire life, I felt alive, like I could finally breathe, while I suffocated in your lies. We sat in silence for a long moment. The cafe sounds, clinking cups, murmured conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine, felt like they were coming from another world. Finally I spoke, my voice cold and final. I want a divorce. Edward nodded miserably. I understand. I don't hate you for being gay, Edward. I hate you for making me complicit in your closet. I hate you for stealing my life. I never meant. It doesn't matter what you meant. I stood, gathering my purse. What matters is what you did. But as I turned to leave, Edward grabbed my wrist. His grip was desperate, his eyes wild. Wait, there's something else. Something you need to know. I don't want to hear. You're in danger. The words came out in a rush. Richard Montgomery knows about Andrew and me. He's been blackmailing me for 2 years. And Isabel, he's done things, financial things, using your name. If this comes out, if he decides to expose everything, you're going to be implicated in fraud you had nothing to do with. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. What? I tried to protect you. I swear I tried, but he has your signatures, I yanked my wrist free. You're lying. This is just another manipulation. I wish I were. Edward's face had gone pale. Ask Andrew. He has proof. Papers, documents. Richard is dangerous and you need to... But I was already walking away, his words chasing me out into the parking lot. Fraud, blackmail, danger. Just when I thought my life couldn't shatter any further, Edward had found another hammer. A week passed in a blur of lawyer consultations and sleepless nights. Martha had her paralegal draw up divorce papers, while I tried to convince myself that Edward's warning about Richard Montgomery was just another lie, another manipulation designed to keep me under his control. But the doubt gnawed at me. I was in the living room with Martha, surrounded by legal documents that would officially end my marriage, when the doorbell rang. Expecting someone? Martha asked. Looking up from her laptop, I shook my head and walked to the door, peering through the peephole. My stomach dropped. Andrew stood on my porch, looking as miserable as I felt. He wore jeans and a plain t-shirt, nothing like the polished assistant I'd seen at company functions. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders hunched like he was bracing for an attack. He was right to brace. I yanked the door open. You have 30 seconds before I call the police. Please. His voice cracked. Mrs. Carter, I know you hate me. I know I'm the last person you want to see, but you need to hear what I have to say. Edward is in danger. You're in danger. Is this some kind of sick joke? I wish it were. He pulled a manila envelope from under his arm. Can I just come in for 5 minutes if you still want me to leave after that? I'll go, I swear! Martha appeared behind me, her lawyer instincts on high alert. Isabel, maybe we should... 5 minutes? I said coldly, stepping aside. Andrew entered like a man walking to his execution. He wouldn't sit when I gestured to the couch, instead standing in the middle of my living room, clutching that envelope like it was a life preserver. Talk, I commanded. He took a shaky breath. Richard Montgomery discovered Edward's relationship with me about 2 years ago. I don't know how. Maybe he followed us, maybe someone told him, but he did, and he's been using it ever since. Blackmail, I said flatly. Yes, at first, he just wanted a bigger stake in the company. Edward gave it to him because he was terrified of being exposed. His father had just died, and the thought of that man dying knowing the truth, Andrew's voice wavered. But Richard didn't stop. He got greedier. He opened the envelope, spreading documents across my coffee table, bank statements, corporate filings, contracts. He started moving money, Andrew continued, creating shell companies, siphoning funds from Carter Tech, small amounts at first, then larger ones. And he needed someone to sign off on these transactions. My mouth went dry. No. He forged your signature? Mrs. Carter, on dozens of documents, you're listed as a co-owner on several subsidiaries that Edward set up years ago to protect your financial future. Richard exploited that if anyone investigates. If the SEC or the FBI gets involved, your name is all over these fraudulent transactions. Martha was already scanning the documents, her face growing paler by the second. Jesus Christ, Isabel, this is bad. This is really, really bad. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The room tilted sideways. How much? I finally managed. At least $2 million that we can prove. Maybe more. $2 million. Fraud. My signature. Or a forgery so good it might as well be mine. Authorizing theft. Why are you telling me this? I looked at Andrew, searching his face for deception. What do you get out of warning me? For the first time, his composure cracked completely. Tears streamed down his face. Because I love him, he whispered. I love Edward more than anything. And he's been destroying himself trying to protect you from this. He wanted to go to the police weeks ago, but Richard threatened to hurt you, to hurt your kids. And he wiped his eyes roughly. I never wanted to be part of hurting anyone. I never wanted any of this. But you slept with my husband. Yes, he met my eyes. And I'm not going to apologize for loving him, but I am sorry that loving him meant lying to you. You didn't deserve that. You didn't deserve any of this. The honesty in his voice surprised me. I'd expected defensiveness, justification. anything but this raw admission. Martha cleared her throat. Where's Edward now? I don't know. He's been staying at a hotel, but he won't tell me which one. He's paranoid that Richard is having him followed. Andrew pulled out another document. This is everything I could gather. Emails where Richard threatened him, copies of the forged documents, bank records showing where the money went. I'm risking everything giving this to you, but you need to protect yourself. I took the papers with numb fingers. Why would Richard threaten Edward if he's already got him under his thumb? Because Edward was going to expose him anyway. Last week, he told Richard he was done, that he'd rather lose everything than keep living like this. Andrew's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Richard said if Edward went to the police, you'd be implicated, that he'd make sure you went to prison. The threat hung in the air like smoke. He's bluffing, Martha said, but her voice lacked conviction. With proper legal representation, maybe. Andrew shrugged helplessly. But do you want to risk it? Do you want to stake Mrs. Carter's freedom on maybe? I looked at this young man, this interloper who'd destroyed my marriage, and saw something unexpected in his eyes. Genuine concern, maybe even compassion. Why are you really here, Andrew? He smiled sadly. Because Edward asked me to. Said if anything happened to him, I should make sure you knew the truth. Make sure you could protect yourself. He moved toward the door. I should go. I've already stayed longer than 5 minutes. Wait. The word escaped before I could stop it. Does Edward know you're here? No, he'd kill me if he knew. He didn't want to drag you any deeper into this mess. Andrew paused at the threshold. For what it's worth, Mrs. Carter, he did love you. Maybe not the way you deserved, but in his own way, you were everything to him. You still are. Then he was gone, leaving me with a pile of incriminating documents and more questions than answers. Martha and I stared at each other. Well, she said finally. Shit. It was the most eloquent summary I'd heard all day. Martha's office became my second home over the next 2 weeks. We spent countless hours hunched over documents, tracing the intricate web Richard Montgomery had woven with my unwitting signature. Here, Martha said, pointing to a contract dated 18 months ago. This one created Precision Holdings, LLC. Your signature authorized the initial capital investment, $750,000 from Carter Tech's operating fund. I've never even heard of Precision Holdings. That's because it doesn't exist. Well, it exists on paper, but there's no actual business. The money went in and immediately got transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. She pulled up another document. Same pattern here and here and here. 15 different shell companies, all using variations of your signature. I studied the signatures. They were good, too good. The slight upward tilt of my C, the way my R looped back on itself. Someone had studied my handwriting carefully. Could a handwriting expert prove these are forgeries? Martha's expression told me everything. Maybe, maybe not. They're sophisticated enough that reasonable doubt would be difficult to establish. And even if we could prove forgery, you'd still have to explain why you didn't notice all these transactions. Because Edward handled all the business finances, I trusted him, which a jury might see as willful ignorance. I dropped my head into my hands. How did my life become a legal thriller? The same way it became a gay romance, Martha said dryly. Your husband had secrets. Despite everything, I almost laughed. We tried calling Edward. His cell went straight to voicemail. His office claimed he'd taken a leave of absence. Andrew had vanished too, his apartment empty, his phone disconnected. Then the article dropped. Carter Tech CEO under investigation for financial irregularities. The headline blazed across the Atlanta Business Chronicle's website on a Tuesday morning. I was drinking coffee when Lucy called. Her voice panicked. Mom, are you seeing this? What is this about? I'll call you back, sweetheart. But I didn't call back. I couldn't because by noon, 3 news vans were parked outside my house. And by evening, my name was trending on local Twitter. Isabel Carter, wife of Edward Carter, listed as co-owner on multiple suspicious entities. Sources say Mrs. Carter signed off on millions in questionable transactions breaking. FBI opens preliminary inquiry into Carter Tech finances. The FBI, the actual FBI. Martha fielded calls while I sat frozen on my couch, watching my reputation disintegrate in real time. Friends who'd known me for decades suddenly couldn't return my calls. The country club where I'd been a member for 15 years quietly removed my name from the membership roster. Daniel showed up that night, his face tight with anger. Tell me it's not true. He stood in my doorway, refusing to come inside. Tell me you didn't help Dad steal money. Of course I didn't. Then why is your name on everything? Why are they saying you authorized these transfers? Because I was set up. Daniel, your father was being blackmailed, and Richard Montgomery forged my... Enough! He turned away, running his hands through his hair. God, I can't believe this. My entire life is imploding. Do you know what people are saying at my office? Do you know what my girlfriend's parents said when they saw the news? I'm sorry. Are you in love with him? The question came from nowhere, raw and desperate. Is that it? Did you help Dad hide his affair because you love him that much? The accusation stung worse than anything the media had printed. Your father and I are getting divorced. And no, I didn't help him do anything. I was lied to just like you. Yeah, well, right now, it doesn't feel like we're on the same side. He walked away before I could respond, and I watched his car peel out of my driveway, with my heart shattering into smaller and smaller pieces. Lucy was kinder but distant. She called instead of visiting, her voice carefully neutral. I believe you. Mom, I do, but this is a lot to process. That night, alone in my house, I received an email from an unknown address. Stay quiet or your children will pay for your sins. No signature, no other context. Just that single, chilling sentence. I forwarded it to Martha, who immediately contacted the police. They added it to the file, as if my life had been reduced to a manila folder in some detective's desk drawer. The next morning, I did something I swore I'd never do. I went back to Carter Tech. The building that had once made me proud now felt like enemy territory. I walked past the security guard, different from the one who'd warned me, thank God, and straight to the executive floor. Richard Montgomery's secretary tried to stop me. Mrs. Carter, you can't just... Watch me! I stormed into the conference room where the board was meeting. 15 faces turned to stare at me. Surprise, discomfort, and in Richard's case, barely concealed amusement. Isabel, he said smoothly, standing. What an unexpected visit. We're in the middle of... I know exactly what you're in the middle of. I slapped the documents on the conference table. You've been stealing from this company for 2 years, and you forged my signature to cover your tracks. Silence, complete, suffocating silence. Richard's smile never wavered. That's quite an accusation. Do you have proof? Right here, bank records, shell companies, offshore transfers, all with signatures you faked. He picked up one of the documents, studying it with theatrical concern. This signature looks genuine to me. Perhaps you forgot authorizing these transactions. It must be stressful. Going through a divorce. Memory can be so unreliable under stress. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. I saw it then. The doubt in their eyes. The questions about my stability. Edward will confirm everything I'm saying. Edward. Richard raised an eyebrow. The same Edward who's been missing for 2 weeks. The same Edward who cleaned out his office in the middle of the night and disappeared. That Edward, my confidence faltered. He's not missing, he's just running. Yes, that's what guilty people tend to do. Richard's voice turned sympathetic, which was somehow worse than mockery. Isabel, I understand you're going through something difficult. Why don't you go home, rest, and let us handle the business side of things? This isn't over. No, he agreed quietly. I don't suppose it is. I left the building with as much dignity as I could muster, which wasn't much. Martha was waiting in the parking lot. How'd it go? She asked, though my face probably told her everything. He's winning. Not yet, he isn't. She handed me her phone. Look what I found. Edward transferred 40% of Carter Tech's shares to your name 3 months ago, before any of this blew up. It's buried in paperwork, but it's there. I stared at the document. 40%. That made me the second largest shareholder in the company. Why would he do that? Insurance, maybe, or an apology, or both. Martha smiled grimly. But here's what matters. You have real power in that company now, and if we play this right, we can use it. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair. I felt like fighting back. Martha thought I was making a mistake. She said so at least 15 times on the drive to the police station. You should let the lawyers handle this. Going public with accusations you can't completely prove yet is dangerous. What's dangerous is letting Richard Montgomery think he's won. We'd spent 3 days organizing everything. Andrew's documents, the bank records, the forensic analysis of my supposedly authentic signatures. Martha had hired a handwriting expert who testified that while the forgeries were excellent, microscopic analysis revealed pressure points inconsistent with my natural writing pattern. It wasn't proof, but it was doubt, and doubt was better than nothing. Detective Sarah Chen met us in a sparse interrogation room that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. She was younger than I expected, mid-30s maybe, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Carter, thank you for coming in." She gestured to the chairs. "I understand you have information about the Carter Tech investigation." For the next hour, I walked her through everything, the blackmail, the shell companies, Richard's threats. I showed her the documents Andrew had provided, explained Edward's disappearance, laid out the entire ugly truce. Detective Chen took notes, her expression unreadable. "This is helpful," she said finally, "but I have to be honest. Proving you didn't know about these transactions will be difficult. You're legally listed as an owner of these subsidiaries because my husband put my name on them years ago. I never actually managed them, which Mr. Montgomery will argue shows negligence at best, complicity at worst." She softened slightly. "I believe you, Mrs. Carter, but belief isn't evidence. Then let me get you evidence." Martha grabbed my arm. "Isabel, don't..." But I was already committed. "Richard thinks he's untouchable, he's arrogant, and arrogant people make mistakes. Let me wear a wire, let me get him to confess." "Absolutely not," Martha said. "That's insane." Detective Chen studied me. "It's also illegal without a warrant, and dangerous even with one. But if I went to him as a distraught ex-wife, begging for help navigating the scandal," I leaned forward. "He'd love that. He's already playing the concerned colleague, give me a wire, give me the warrant, and I'll get you what you need." "You watch too much television," Martha muttered, but Detective Chen was considering it. I could see the calculation in her eyes, the potential reward versus the risk. "Let me talk to my supervisor," she said. 2 days later, I was fitted with a recording device so small I could barely feel it. Detective Chen's instructions were explicit. "Get him talking about the fraud, but don't push too hard. Let him think he's helping me. If you feel unsafe at any moment," she emphasized, "say the word Charleston. We'll have units positioned nearby." I scheduled lunch with Richard at an upscale restaurant in Buckhead. Neutral territory, public enough to feel safe, private enough for confession. He arrived exactly on time, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. "Isabel," he kissed my cheek like we were old friends. "I'm so glad you reached out. This whole situation must be overwhelming. That's one word for it." I kept my voice trembling, playing the broken woman. "Richard, I don't know what to do. The lawyers are saying I could be charged as an accessory, and I swear I had no idea what Edward was doing." "Of course you didn't." He ordered wine for both of us, without asking my preference. "Edward always kept you sheltered from the business side. Some would call that chivalrous. Others might say it was controlling. I just want this nightmare to end." "I'm sure you do." He leaned back, swirling his wine. "The problem is your signature is on all those documents. That creates what we call legal exposure. But you know I didn't. I mean, you were there. You saw how uninvolved I was." Something flickered in his expression. Satisfaction, maybe. "I did see that, yes. You were always the perfect corporate wife. Smiled for the cameras, stayed quiet during meetings, never asked difficult questions." He took a sip of wine. "Which makes me wonder, did you really not know, or did you simply not want to know?" The accusation stung, but I pushed down my anger. "What do you mean?" "Come on, Isabel. Edward was siphoning money for months, using company funds for his little love nest with Andrew, setting up accounts, moving assets around. You expect me to believe you noticed nothing? Edward handled all the finances. How convenient." Richard's smile sharpened. "But here's the thing about plausible deniability. It only works if people believe you. And right now, with your signatures on all those documents, with your name on all those accounts, belief is a luxury you can't afford. Are you saying I should just accept being blamed for something I didn't do?" "I'm saying you should be pragmatic." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Here's what I can offer. You quietly resign any claims to Carter Tech. You sign a statement accepting responsibility for oversight failures, and I make sure the criminal investigation focuses on Edward. Not you. You walk away with your freedom and a modest settlement. And if I don't, his eyes went cold, then I can't protect you from what those documents reveal. Signatures don't lie, Isabel, and yours is on every single fraudulent transaction. Because you forged them. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Richard's expression froze. Excuse me? You heard me? You forged my signatures. You created those shell companies. You stole that money. And you've been blackmailing Edward for years. Richard stood slowly. For a moment I thought he'd simply walk away. Instead he bent close, his voice a whisper. You can't prove that. No one will believe a bitter ex-wife over a respected businessman. And if you try to fight me, I'll destroy you. His smile returned, cold as winter. I'll destroy your children too. Daniel's firm won't touch him after I make a few calls. Lucy's little nonprofit. I know people on their board. My hands shook, but I kept my voice steady. You're threatening my children. I'm explaining consequences. He straightened his tie. Think carefully, Isabel. You have 48 hours to accept my offer. He walked away, leaving me alone at the table with a wire recording every word. I pressed my napkin to my face, partly to hide my expression from other diners, partly because I was genuinely shaking. Detective Chen's voice crackled in my hidden earpiece. We got it. Every word. Are you okay? I nodded slightly, then realized she couldn't see me. Yes. Stay there. Order dessert if you need to. We're moving now. Through the restaurant window, I watched Richard climb into his Mercedes. He pulled out of the parking lot, probably thinking he'd won. He didn't see the 3 unmarked cars that followed. Martha appeared beside me 15 minutes later, sliding into Richard's empty seat. Jesus, Isabel, that was the gutsiest, most reckless thing I've ever seen. She grabbed my hand. Also brilliant, but mostly reckless. Did they arrest him? Not yet. They're getting a warrant based on the recording. Should be executed within hours. She squeezed my fingers. You did it. You actually did it. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired that evening. The news broke. Richard Montgomery, prominent Atlanta businessman, arrested on charges of fraud, extortion, and forgery. The story dominated every local channel. My phone exploded with messages. Some apologetic, some congratulatory, some still skeptical. Daniel's text came at 9 p.m. Mom, I saw the news. I'm sorry I doubted you. Lucy called, crying. I'm so proud of you. But the person I most wanted to hear from remained silent. Edward was still missing, and somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice whispered that this wasn't over yet. 2 months after Richard's arrest, I still couldn't sleep through the night. The media circus had finally died down. Richard was out on bail, fighting the charges with an army of expensive lawyers who claimed the recording was entrapment. Martha assured me the prosecution's case was solid, but solid didn't mean certain. My life had become a strange limbo, not quite vindicated, not quite free. Lucy had moved back in with me, claiming she wanted to help manage the fallout, but I knew the truth. She was worried about leaving me alone. At 54, I'd become someone my daughter felt needed watching. The irony wasn't lost on me. Daniel visited every Sunday now, making awkward small talk over coffee. We were rebuilding something, though I wasn't sure what. The relationship we'd had before seemed impossible to resurrect. Too much had changed. Too many illusions had shattered. Have you heard from Dad? He asked one afternoon. No, have you? He sent me an email last week from a burner account. Just said he was safe and that he loved me. Daniel stirred his coffee obsessively. I didn't write back. I don't know what to say to him. Neither do I. The truth was, Edward's disappearance haunted me more than his betrayal. Where was he? Was he safe? Part of me, the part that had loved him for 30 years, still worried. The other part was furious that he'd abandoned me to deal with this mess alone. Tuesday morning, I found the envelope. It was in my mailbox, buried under credit card offers and grocery store circulars. Plain white, no return address. My name written in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a photograph. Edward lay in a hospital bed, pale as the sheets beneath him, bandages visible on his chest and shoulder. Andrew sat beside him, holding his hand, his face etched with exhaustion. My heart stopped. I flipped the photo over. On the back, someone had written in blue ink, Houston Methodist Hospital, room 417. He tried to stop Richard. Got hurt. He's alive. But he needs you. He has the final proof. And my hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. Lucy! My voice came out strangled. She appeared in the kitchen doorway, took one look at my face and rushed over. When she saw the photograph, she gasped. Oh my God, is that... When was this taken? I don't know. Recently, I think. I studied Edward's face in the image. He looked 20 years older. He tried to stop Richard. Andrew says he has proof. Mom, this could be a trap. Richard's still out on bail. What if he sent this to lure you somewhere? The same thought had occurred to me, but I looked at Edward's face again. The pain in his expression, the vulnerability, and something in my chest cracked open. I have to go. Then I'm coming with you. No, I grabbed her shoulders. If this is a trap, I won't risk you too. But I have to know, Lucy. I have to know if he's really hurt. I called Martha, who immediately went into lawyer mode. Don't go alone. At least take a bodyguard. Let me make some calls. There's no time for calls. What if he's dying? What if it's Richard trying to eliminate the only witness who can corroborate your story? Martha's voice rose. Use your head, Isabel. But my head wasn't in control anymore. I booked a flight to Houston that afternoon. Lucy insisted on driving me to the airport, arguing the entire way. This is insane. You don't even know if he's really there. Then I'll find out and come home. Mom! Lucy! I turned to her at the departure drop-off. I know you don't understand. Hell, I don't understand it myself. But I spent 30 years married to that man. Maybe it was built on lies. Maybe it was all wrong from the start. But I can't just leave him bleeding in some hospital room. I can't be that person. Tears filled her eyes. You're too good for him. You always have been. Maybe, but that's not his fault. The flight was 3 hours of pure anxiety. I kept the photograph in my purse. Pulling it out every few minutes like checking would somehow change what it showed. A man I'd once loved, broken and alone. A stranger with his hand, providing comfort I couldn't give. When we landed, I went straight to the hospital. Houston Methodist was massive, gleaming with that particular sterility all hospitals share. I found room 417 on the 4th floor. My heart hammering so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. I stood outside the door for a full minute, gathering courage. Then I knocked. Andrew opened it. He looked worse than in the photograph. Thinner, haunted, like he'd aged a decade in 2 months. When he saw me, relief flooded his face. Mrs. Carter, you came. I wasn't sure if you would. Is he really here? Is he really hurt? Andrew stepped aside, revealing the room beyond. Edward lay exactly as he had in the photograph. His eyes were closed, chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Monitors beeped steadily. An IV dripped clear fluid into his arm. What happened? I whispered, moving closer to the bed despite myself. Richard found out Edward was planning to testify against him 3 weeks ago in Miami. They were supposed to meet to talk, to try to settle things quietly. But Richard, Andrew's voice broke. He brought people, men with knives. They attacked Edward in a parking garage. Horror washed over me. Oh my God! I was there. I managed to fight them off. Barely. Got Edward to a hospital, but we couldn't use our real names. Richard has connections everywhere, so we came here. Been hiding ever since. I reached the bedside, looking down at Edward's face. Even unconscious, he looked exhausted. There were new lines carved around his eyes, new gray in his hair. Is he going to be okay? Physically, yes. The doctors say he'll recover, but Mrs. Carter... Andrew's voice dropped to a whisper. He's been asking for you, even through the pain meds. Even half-conscious. Your name is what he says. Tears blurred my vision. I didn't know what to feel. Anger, grief, love, betrayal, all of it tangling together into something unnamed, as if sensing my presence. Edward's eyes fluttered open. They were unfocused at first, then landed on my face. Isabel. His voice was rough, barely audible. You're real. I'm real. A tear slid down his cheek. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. For everything, for all of it. I pulled a chair close to the bed, sitting down heavily. What were you thinking? Confronting Richard alone. Had to. Protect you. He was going to frame you for everything. Edward's breathing was labored. I couldn't let that happen. You're innocent. You've always been innocent. You almost died. Would have been what I deserved. His hand moved toward mine, then stopped, unsure. I know I have no right to ask, but the evidence, it's in my phone, everything. Recordings, documents, Richard confessing to the forgeries, the blackmail, planning the attack, all of it. Andrew produced a phone from his pocket. I already gave copies to Detective Chen in Atlanta, but Edward wanted you to have the originals, wanted you to be the one to decide what to do with them. I took the phone. Feeling its weight, this small device held the power to destroy Richard completely, to clear my name beyond any doubt. Edward was watching me with desperate eyes. Please finish this for both of us. Why didn't you just send these to the police yourself? Because, he coughed, wincing, because you deserved to be the hero of this story, not me. I've been the villain long enough. We sat in silence, the monitors beeping their steady rhythm. Finally, I spoke. I'll do it. I'll make sure Richard pays for everything he's done. Thank you. Edward's eyes were drifting closed again. Isabel, I really did love you. Maybe not right, but true. As true as I knew how. I know. And the terrifying thing was, I did know. I believed him as his breathing evened out into sleep. I sat there holding the evidence that would end this nightmare, looking at the man I'd built my life around, feeling nothing but exhausted. Bittersweet peace. Andrew touched my shoulder gently. Thank you for coming. Take care of him, I said. He's going to need you. Always. Andrew smiled sadly. He's lucky, you know, to have had you, even if he didn't deserve it. I left Houston that night with the evidence and something else. Closure, maybe. Or just the exhausted acceptance that some stories don't have neat endings. They just end. The evidence on Edward's phone was devastating. Martha and I spent 72 hours going through it with Detective Chen and an assistant district attorney named Marcus Webb, who looked too young to shave, let alone prosecute major fraud cases. But he was sharp, ruthlessly so. This is a prosecutor's dream, he said, scrolling through the recordings. Montgomery explicitly discussing the forgeries, admitting to blackmail, even joking about framing you Jesus. He practically confesses to hiring those men to attack your husband. Ex-husband, I corrected automatically. Right, ex-husband. Webb looked up. Mrs. Carter, with this evidence, we can put Richard Montgomery away for 20 years. Maybe more. How long until you move on him? We can have an arrest warrant by morning. Updated charges by end of week, he grinned. This is the kind of case that makes careers. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. They arrested Richard at 6 a.m. on a Thursday morning. I wasn't there. Detective Chen had strongly advised against it. But Lucy showed me the news footage afterward. Richard in handcuffs, being led from his Buckhead mansion in his pajamas, cameras flashing like lightning. His famous composure finally cracked. He looked old, diminished, scared, good. The media descended like locusts. The story had everything they loved. Betrayal, corporate corruption, attempted murder. My phone rang constantly with interview requests I ignored, but the vindication was public and undeniable. Fraud charges expanded against Montgomery. Recorded evidence shows systematic forgery scheme. Isabel Carter, cleared of all wrongdoing my name, once dragged through mud, was suddenly golden again. People who'd pretended not to know me at the grocery store now stopped to offer congratulations. The country club sent a letter of apology and an invitation to renew my membership. I burned it. Daniel visited the day after Richard's arrest, bringing flowers and an expression of profound guilt. Mom, I don't know how to apologize for doubting you. You don't have to. Yes, I do. He set the flowers down, then pulled me into a fierce hug. I was so angry about Dad, about everything, that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. You're the strongest person I know, and I treated you like a criminal. You were hurt and confused. That's not an excuse. He pulled back, wiping his eyes. I talked to Dad yesterday, called the hospital in Houston. My heart skipped. How is he? Better. They're moving him to a regular room tomorrow. He asked about you. Daniel smiled tentatively. Said you saved his life by bringing that evidence forward. Richard's lawyers are already trying to negotiate a plea deal. Good. Do you think you'll ever forgive him for the lying? The affair, all of it. I considered the question carefully. I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, but I understand him better now, and I'm not angry anymore. Just sad for the time we lost. That's more grace than he deserves. Maybe, but holding on to anger only hurts me, not him. Daniel stayed for dinner. We talked about everything and nothing. His work, Lucy's nonprofit, my plans for the future. It felt almost normal, except for the massive elephant in the room we were all politely ignoring. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. Edward appeared via video conference from Houston, still recovering. He looked healthier than in the hospital, but fragile in ways that had nothing to do with physical wounds. The judge read through the settlement. I got the house, a substantial financial package, and 40% of Carter Tech's remaining value after Richard's embezzlement was accounted for. Edward kept the rest and agreed to step down as CEO. Mr. Carter, do you have anything you'd like to say? The judge asked. Edward looked directly into the camera, which meant he was looking at me on the courtroom monitor. Isabel deserves better than anything I can give her. She deserves honesty, respect, and a love without conditions. I hope she finds that, his voice cracked, and I hope someday she can remember some of our years together without only seeing the lies. I wanted to be unmoved. I wanted to feel nothing but righteous anger. Instead, tears streamed down my face. Mrs. Carter, the judge's voice was gentle. Anything you'd like to add? I looked at the screen, at the man I'd loved for 30 years, at the stranger who'd been hiding inside him all along. I hope you find peace, Edward. Real peace, the kind that comes from living honestly. Thank you, he whispered, for everything. The judge declared us officially divorced at 3:47 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. 30 years dissolved in a single word, granted, outside the courthouse. Martha hugged me while photographers snapped pictures. How do you feel? She asked. Free, I said, surprised to find it was true. That weekend, Edward sent me a handwritten letter. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. Dear Isabel, I know I have no right to write to you, but I needed you to know something. Andrew and I are moving to Seattle. We're going to live openly, honestly, for the first time in my life. It's terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I'll never stop being sorry for the pain I caused you, but I'm grateful. God, I'm so grateful that you survived my cowardice. You're going to do amazing things with the life you've reclaimed. Daniel told me he's planning to visit us next month. That's more than I deserve, but I'm grateful for that too. Thank you for raising such a forgiving son. I hope you find love again. Isabel, real, uncomplicated, joyful love. You deserve nothing less. With profound regret and equally profound respect, Edward. I folded the letter carefully and put it in a box with our wedding photos, divorce papers, and all the other artifacts of our complicated history. Then I called a real estate agent about selling the Atlanta house. It was time for a new chapter, one that I got to write myself. Richard's trial was set for 6 months out, but his lawyers convinced him to take a plea deal. 15 years for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit assault. I attended the sentencing. He looked smaller in his orange jumpsuit. All his arrogance stripped away. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, he stood and turned to where I sat in the gallery. Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry, I was desperate and stupid, and I destroyed a lot of lives because of it. I nodded once. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement. As they led him away, I felt the last weight lift from my shoulders. Outside the courthouse, Lucy was waiting. Ready to go home, Mom. Not Atlanta, I said. Let's go to Charleston. I want to see the ocean. We drove to the coast that afternoon, checked into a beachfront hotel, and walked along the shore as the sun set. The Atlantic stretched out endlessly, dark and beautiful and full of possibility. What are you going to do now? Lucy asked. I thought about Edward in Seattle, building a life of truce, about Richard in prison, paying for his crimes, about Daniel slowly forgiving his father, about Martha, my constant champion, and I thought about myself, 54 years old, divorced, vindicated, and standing at the edge of everything that came next. I'm going to live, I said simply. Really live. For the first time in 30 years, that didn't feel like a lie. 6 months after the divorce, I bought a building in downtown Charleston. It was an old historic property on King Street. Built in 1887, with original heart pine floors and tall windows that let in floods of golden light, The previous owners had used it as an antique shop, but I saw something different in those sun-soaked rooms. I saw home. "You're really doing this?" Lucy asked, standing in the empty space with me on a humid July morning. "The cafe thing?" "I'm really doing it." "Mom, you've never worked in food service. You don't know anything about running a business." "Then I'll learn." I spun in the middle of the room, arms outstretched. I spent 30 years being Edward Carter's wife. Now I get to figure out who Isabel Carter is. Lucy smiled despite her concerns. "Okay, then I'm in. You don't have to—" "I mean," she repeated firmly. "Someone needs to handle the boring stuff like permits and payroll. You can be the dreamer. I'll be the pragmatist." We opened Isabel's Cafe in September. The renovation took 2 months and most of my settlement money. We kept the historic elements, the exposed brick, the tin ceiling, the vintage chandelier, but added comfortable furniture, bookshelves lining the walls, and a corner stage for live music on weekends. Martha came to the grand opening, bringing half of Atlanta's legal community with her. "I'm proud of you," she said, hugging me tight. "This place is perfect," and it was, not in a polished corporate way, but in a lived-in, authentic way that felt like an extension of who I was becoming. We served good coffee, homemade pastries, and soup of the day. Nothing fancy, nothing trying too hard, just honest food in an honest space. The cafe became something I hadn't expected, a gathering place for people with stories. There was Patricia, a widow in her 70s who came every morning for a black coffee and a blueberry scone. She'd lost her husband to cancer 3 years ago and spent her days volunteering at the library. There was James, a college student working on his dissertation about Reconstruction-era Charleston. He claimed our corner table with the best light and spent hours typing furiously. There was Rosa, who'd recently come out to her conservative Catholic family and needed somewhere to exist without judgment. They all found their way to my cafe, to my tables, to my coffee, and my quiet acceptance. And then there was Michael. He started coming in around October, always at 2 p.m., always ordering black coffee, and sitting at the window table where he'd pull out a laptop and write for hours. I noticed him because he noticed everything. The way the afternoon light hit the brick wall, the jazz playing softly in the background, the conversations happening around him. He'd occasionally glance up from his laptop and smile at something he'd overheard, like he was collecting moments. "He's cute," Lucy whispered one afternoon, passing me with a tray of dirty dishes. "He's a customer. A cute customer who's been eye-flirting with you for 3 weeks. Eye-flirting isn't a real thing. It absolutely is. And you're doing it too." I busied myself wiping down the espresso machine. But I was lying. I had noticed him. How could I not? He had kind eyes and gray temples and laugh lines that suggested he smiled more than he frowned. He wore button-downs with the sleeves rolled up and always had ink stains on his fingers. It took another week before we actually spoke beyond coffee orders. He was packing up his laptop when I approached with the coffee pot. "Refill before you go." "I'd love one, actually. Best coffee in Charleston." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Do you have a minute? I've been wanting to talk to you." I glanced around the cafe. The afternoon rush had passed, and Lucy could handle the remaining customers. "Sure." I sat, and he extended his hand. "I'm Michael Torres. I've been rude, coming here every day without properly introducing myself." "Isabel Carter." I shook his hand. "And you haven't been rude. Most of my customers don't introduce themselves beyond their coffee preferences." "I know who you are." He said it gently without judgment. "I covered your story. Well, part of it. I'm a freelance journalist. I wrote about the Richard Montgomery case for The Atlantic." My stomach dropped. "Oh, I hope that doesn't make you uncomfortable. I try to be fair in my coverage, to focus on the corporate corruption rather than the personal details." He looked genuinely concerned. "I can find another cafe if it bothers you." "No, it's fine." And surprisingly it was. His article had been one of the few that treated me like a person rather than a scandal. "I actually appreciated your piece. You were one of the only journalists who didn't sensationalize everything." "That's because sensationalizing people's pain is garbage journalism." He smiled ruefully. "Also, I've been through my own public dissolution. My wife died 3 years ago, cancer, and the obituary mentioned she was a federal prosecutor working on a major case. Every conspiracy theorist on the internet decided she'd been murdered. I spent 6 months fighting to preserve her memory while strangers on Twitter played detective. God, I'm so sorry. Thank you. The point is, I know what it feels like to have your worst moments dissected by strangers. So I tried to write about people the way I'd want someone to write about me or Sarah. We talked for an hour about journalism and grief and reinvention, about Charleston versus Atlanta, about the blessing and curse of starting over in your 50s, about the strange relief of losing everything and discovering you're still standing. He came back the next day, and the day after that. Our conversations stretched longer. We talked about books and music and the proper way to make Cuban coffee. His grandmother's recipe involved a mocha pot and what he called dangerous amounts of sugar. He told me about Sarah, how they'd met in college, how she'd taught him to sail, how the grief still ambushed him in unexpected moments. I told him about Edward. Not everything, not yet, but enough. About the betrayal and the fraud and the complicated process of forgiving someone who'd stolen your past. Do you regret it? Michael asked one afternoon in November. The 30 years. I considered the question carefully. I regret the lies, but Lucy and Daniel exist because of those years, and I learned things about myself, about resilience, about grace, that I might never have learned otherwise. So no, I don't regret it. I just wish it had been different. That's very evolved of you. Or very tired. I'm not sure I have the energy for hatred anymore. He laughed, and the sound filled the cafe like light. By December, Michael was coming to the cafe every day, but he'd stopped pretending it was about the coffee or the Wi-Fi. One evening, after I'd closed up, he helped me stack chairs on tables. I'm going to say something, and you can absolutely tell me to mind my own business, he started. That's a terrifying opening. I think you're incredible, and I'd like to take you to dinner, not here, where you're the boss and I'm the customer. Somewhere neutral, where we're just two people who enjoy each other's company. My heart did something complicated, a flutter mixed with panic, mixed with possibility. Michael, I'm barely divorced. I'm still figuring out who I am without being someone's wife. I know. And I'm not trying to rush you into anything, but Isabel. He moved closer, his voice soft. I lost Sarah 3 years ago, and I thought that was it for me. No more connection. No more risking heartbreak. Then I walked into your cafe looking for decent coffee and found you instead. And every day I sit at that window table. I'm not really writing. I'm working up the courage to ask if maybe, possibly, you might want to see where this goes. I looked at this man, this kind, patient, funny man who'd lost his own wife and understood grief's complicated geography. Can we start slow? Maybe coffee that isn't here. His smile could have lit the entire city. I'd love that. Okay then, coffee. Coffee, he agreed. And for the first time since that terrible Friday morning, when my world imploded, I felt something that wasn't grief or anger or exhaustion. I felt hope. Spring came to Charleston like a whisper, turning the city into something from a watercolor painting. Azaleas bloomed in violent pinks and purples. The air smelled like jasmine and possibility. It had been a year since that Friday morning that changed everything. I stood in my cafe on a Tuesday morning in April, watching the sun stream through the tall windows, and realized I was happy. Not the performed happiness I'd perfected during my marriage, but genuine, complicated, messy happiness. The cafe had become more than I'd imagined. We hosted book clubs on Wednesday nights, open mic poetry on Thursdays, and a support group for divorcees on Saturday mornings that Patricia had started after one particularly emotional conversation over coffee. We're all recovering from something, she'd said. Might as well do it together. Lucy had moved to Charleston permanently, taking over the business operations, while I focused on creating the kind of space where broken things could heal. She'd also started dating a marine biologist named Simone, and watching my daughter fall in love with such uncomplicated joy made my chest ache in the best way. Daniel visited every few weeks, usually bringing his girlfriend Keiko. He'd made peace with Edward. They talked on the phone regularly now, and he was planning to visit Seattle in the summer. Dad's different, Daniel told me during his last visit. Lighter somehow, like he can finally breathe. I'm glad. Are you really? I mean, after everything. I'd thought about that question a lot. Yes, his happiness doesn't diminish my pain, But it also doesn't add to it. He's living his truth now. That's what I wanted for both of us all along. Even when I didn't know it, Michael had become a constant presence in my life. Though we kept our relationship deliberately slow, we had coffee dates that turned into long walks along the Battery. He introduced me to his teenage daughter, Emma, who came down from Atlanta every other weekend. I introduced him to Martha, who interrogated him like a hostile witness before finally approving. "He's good for you," she said. "You actually laugh now. Real laughs. Not those polite hostess laughs you perfected during your marriage." I didn't realize I'd stopped laughing. You'd stopped doing a lot of things. It's good to see you finding them again. On a warm evening in May, Michael and I were closing the cafe together, a routine we'd fallen into naturally. He washed while I dried, and we talked about everything and nothing. "Emma wants to meet you properly," he said, handing me a wet plate. Not just casual hellos at the cafe, a real dinner, the three of us. My hands stilled. That's a big step. I know, and if you're not ready..." "I didn't say I wasn't ready." I set the plate down, turning to face him. "I'm just aware of what it means, meeting your daughter as your girlfriend, not just as the cafe owner that's declaring something. Is that what this is? Are we declaring something?" I looked at this man who'd been so patient, so kind, so willing to let me heal at my own pace, who brought tulips every Tuesday because I'd mentioned once they were my favorite, who made Emma laugh and Martha approve, and who looked at me like I was something precious rather than something broken. "Yes," I said, "I think we are." He pulled me close, and I let him, marveling at how different this felt from everything I'd known before. There was no performance here, no careful curation of perfect wife behavior, just two people who'd survived their own storms, finding shelter in each other. "I love you," he said simply. "I know it's fast, and I know you've been through hell, but I love you." "It's not fast," I replied. "We've been dancing around this for months, and Michael, I love you too." His kiss tasted like coffee and new beginnings. A week later, Daniel called with unexpected news. "Dad and Andrew are getting married. In September in Seattle. Dad wanted me to ask if you'd be okay with me going. He said he'd understand if it was too much, having his son at his wedding when..." "Go," I interrupted. "Daniel, of course you should go. He's your father. You're really okay with it." "I'm really okay with it." And the shocking thing was, I meant it. He deserves to be happy. They both do. There was a long pause. "Would you... this is probably crazy, but would you consider coming?" Dad didn't ask me to ask. He'd probably have a heart attack if he knew I was, but I think it would mean something. "Closure, maybe." I laughed, shocked by the suggestion. "Daniel, I don't think showing up at your father's gay wedding is standard divorce etiquette. Since when do you care about standard anything?" He had a point. Just think about it. I did think about it. For days, I talked to Martha, who said I was insane. I talked to Lucy, who said it was weirdly beautiful. I talked to Michael, who said simply, "What does your heart tell you?" My heart told me that holding on to old pain served no one. So in September, I flew to Seattle with Daniel and Keiko. Michael came too, holding my hand when anxiety threatened to overwhelm me. The ceremony was in a small garden overlooking Puget Sound. 30 people, mostly friends from Edward's new life, Andrew's family, a few brave colleagues who'd stood by them. Edward saw me arrive and froze. He looked healthy, vibrant even in his navy suit. Andrew stood beside him in gray, and the love between them was so obvious it made my chest ache, not with jealousy, with recognition of something I'd never been able to give him. After the ceremony, Edward approached me cautiously, like I might bolt. "Isabel, I can't believe you came," Daniel asked, "and I wanted to see you happy, really happy." "I am." He glanced at Andrew, who was laughing with Daniel across the garden. "For the first time in my life, I'm not hiding. It's terrifying and perfect." "Good." I meant it. "You deserve that. So do you." He looked at Michael, who was giving us space while chatting with Emma. "He seems kind." "He is. Very." We stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the water. "I'm sorry," Edward said finally. "I'll probably say that until I die, but I mean it every time. I know, and I forgive you. Not because you've earned it necessarily, but because I'm tired of carrying the weight." I turned to him. "We gave each other 3 decades, Edward. Some of it was real, Let's honor that part and leave the rest behind. Tears filled his eyes. Thank you for everything, for coming today, for raising Daniel to be brave enough to include me in his life, for not hating me. I never hated you. I hated what you did, but not you. Andrew joined us then, nervous but smiling. Mrs. Carter. Isabel, I corrected. Just Isabel. Isabel, thank you for being here. It means more than you know. Take care of him, I said simply. He needs someone who sees all of him. I will. I promise. Michael appeared at my side, and I introduced him to Edward and Andrew. They shook hands, these men from different chapters of my life, and I marveled at how strange and wonderful it was to have them all in the same space. Later, on the flight home, Michael asked, "How do you feel?" "Lighter," I said, leaning my head on his shoulder, like I finally put down something I'd been carrying for too long. The cafe continued to thrive. We expanded to include a small bookstore in the back room, curated by Patricia, who had exceptional taste. Rosa started a monthly LGBTQ+ coffee social that drew people from across the state. James finished his dissertation and got a professorship at the College of Charleston, but still came in for his regular corner table. On a crisp morning in December, almost 2 years after that life-changing Friday, I stood in my cafe, watching the usual morning rush. Patricia reading her newspaper, James typing furiously, Rosa laughing with friends, new faces mixing with familiar ones. Michael came through the door carrying tulips, as he did every Tuesday, and kissed me hello like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Busy morning?" he asked. "The best kind of busy." Lucy emerged from the office carrying her tablet. "Mom, the feature just went live. Want to see?" Southern Living had done a piece on the cafe, Charleston's hidden gem, where broken things become beautiful. The article talked about the space, the community, and briefly mentioned my own story of rebuilding after divorce. The last line read, "Isabel Carter proves that life's greatest transformations often come from our deepest fractures." I closed the tablet, looking around at the space I'd built from the ruins of my old life, at the people who'd found sanctuary here, at Michael, who'd shown me that love could be simple and true. "You okay?" Lucy asked. "More than okay." I hugged her tight. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." That afternoon, a young woman came in, mascara running down her face, clearly in crisis. She ordered coffee with shaking hands and sat in the corner, crying quietly. I brought her coffee and a chocolate croissant. "On the house," I said gently. "Whatever you're going through, you don't have to go through it alone." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "How do you know I'm going through something?" "Because I sat in this exact chair 2 years ago, and someone was kind to me. Now I get to pay it forward." She started crying harder, but this time with something like relief. "Does it get better?" she whispered. I thought about Edward in Seattle, living authentically, about Richard in prison, paying his debts, about Daniel, who'd learned to love his father's whole truth, about Lucy, radiant in her relationship, about Martha, still fierce and loyal, about Michael and Emma, who'd become part of my odd, beautiful family. And I thought about myself, 56 now, with gray threading through my hair and laugh lines earned honestly, standing in a cafe I'd built from scratch, surrounded by love that asked nothing but to be accepted. "It gets different," I told her. "And if you're very brave and very patient, different becomes better. Then better becomes beautiful." She smiled weakly. "Promise." I promise. As the sun set over Charleston, painting my cafe in shades of gold and amber, I realized something profound. The life I'd lost wasn't the life I was meant to live. This was all of it. The pain and the healing, the betrayal and the forgiveness, the ending and the beginning, had led me here, to this moment, to this version of myself who knew that love wasn't about possession or performance, but about truth and choice and the courage to start again. The past year had taught me that you can't control how your story starts, but you absolutely can control how it continues, and my story was just beginning.